What's going on, guys? This is Bradley alongside Zach and Dawson, and you are listening to the Charm City Sideline podcast. Today, we are doing our final episode of the offseason position preview series. We've done edge, O-line, receiver, and now secondary. So I guess we're going to get right into it, guys. Ravens have a couple of free agents here. First one, we'll start with corners first. Trey White and Brandon Stevens. I know Dawson might have a lot of thoughts on Brandon Stevens. We'll get to that in a minute. And then in terms of safety, two very complicated situations. I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability. So Darius Washington is a restricted free agent. So basically, the Ravens can put a tender on him. That's a $3.2 million salary with the right to match any contract that another team offers him. But if he does get signed by someone else, the Ravens get no pick compensation and he's gone. Their other option kind of is to use the second round tenders. This is what I was sort of thinking they would do, which basically means if another team signs him, they have to give the Ravens a second round pick. So it'd probably be unlikely that it would happen. That's a $5.3 million salary. Of course, the best thing they could do is just extend him and try to get this all out of there. Then you got Marcus Williams, who it's even more complicated, but his $12 million salary last season was reduced, or this upcoming season was reduced to just $2.1 million. And that created about $10 million in cap space immediately. And then they're going to get $2 million more June 1st. Dead money, close to $7 million for the next 2 years, but he's gone. He's a free agent. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Quickly, just the players on the 53-man roster that are going to be on the team next year, guaranteed: Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Arthur Millette, Jalen Armour-Davis, TJ Tampa, and then safety, you got Kyle Hamilton, Tanusi Kane, and Bo Braid. Dawson, what are your thoughts on either the free agents or the guys on the roster for next season?
Real quick, I just want to give my props to you, Brad. You ripped that off pretty well. I know those are two complicated situations with a lot of different numbers, but you did very well. Overall, I think we all kind of feel well with this room. I mean, the Ravens have always been known to have a very solid secondary unit, granted cornerback and safety, and we know these players play all over the place. They're kind of hybrid players, but I mean, overall, you have the core. You have the all-pro led Marlon Humphrey. You have the promising young guy, Nate Wiggins, who we're all expecting to be a very good player in this league, given his rookie year of the, glimpses and flashes he's shown. Of course, you have Kyle Hamilton. I think it's safe to say our Darius Washington's probably going to be back. I don't see why he would be leaving Baltimore. I think even if a team does offer, I think the Ravens would match 100%. And they like the whole aspect of him and K-Ham, because down the stretch last year, when they finally made the change, the safety room was incredible. The secondary was significantly better, and it helped this team a lot down the stretch. So I think it's also safe to say that we're all okay with moving on from Marcus Williams. It's unfortunately a huge blunder. It was a very bad free agent signing by the Ravens. We were all super excited when it happened, but sadly it didn't work out. So moving on from him, is going to help this team with some cap, kind of get that body out of the room, afford us to bring in some more, better players. When you get into the free agents, I mean, you have Trey White, as I'm looking at the list here, you got Trey White and Brandon Stevens. And Trey White wasn't really a huge player for this team down the stretch, I want to say. Granted, at the trade deadline, we got him for pretty much nothing. He was solid. He was pretty decent, but we didn't see what you'd want to see from him, where heading into free agency, it's like, we want him back. Like, it's not a pressing return for me. Like, if he leaves, I'm not worried. And then Brandon Stevens, there's a lot of mixed emotions in that playing field. I personally am not a fan of Brandon Stevens whatsoever. I'm all for him departing in free agency. And I know this could come back to bite us. I could see him going to Seattle, pairing up with Mike McDonald again, and becoming an all-pro corner. Like, I can already see it etched in stone. It's going to happen. He's a good player. and he's going to want a pretty decent contract given that in 23 he had a very good season when Mike McDonald was here and the Ravens had like literally the best defense in the NFL. He's going to demand a pretty big deal. I'm curious to see what teams go after him. I know the Ravens will probably entertain bringing him back. They'll probably just make a call or two and see what happens. But I don't think it's going to be an urgent re-signing for the Ravens. I don't think they're going to go out here and throw a bag at Brandon Stevens because, like we said, they're confident in this room. They know what they got. They're confident in their history of developing these guys, mid-round corners and bringing in free agents, and they have a great, great season ahead of them. So we're going to dive into all these options with free agents and the draft coming up, but I think the Ravens are confident in this room, and I don't think they're going into free agency in any dire situation where they have to bring somebody back or it's the end of the time. I think they know what they got, and they're going to roll with what we got moving forward.
Yeah, I feel good about the room for sure. The dilemma with Ardarius Washington is what I have my focus on. I hope that he can come back on an extension, just given, that the tender would only involve a 1-year deal. And the difference of just the restricted tender, the basic one being $3 million and the second round being $5 million, I'm sure is the only issue for Mr. DaCosta. If they can save any money in an extension with him, they're going to try and do it right now, just given the cap situation in total. So I'm looking towards that. I'm also looking at this Marcus Williams situation. He announced, or maybe his agent announced, that they were going to probably be released. It wasn't a Ravens came out and said that. It was only announced that they got to a contract restructure. So that's kind of ugly. I know it ended really bad for him, but I can't imagine it's easy as a front office to handle. And Dawson kind of nailed it with Trey White and Brandon Stevens. I'm not really sold on bringing either back. I think Trey would kind of be interesting for a 1-year deal, but I think someone that just got released today, Darius Slay, might be a good replacement if he's willing to take a little less money. That'd be my kind of 2 cents looking towards candidates. But overall, I feel good about this room. And even though we would say this room, we feel confident, I think there's still the weird feeling that the front office wants to keep upgrading it, even if it is, a high pick in the draft or spending a little more money than we would have imagined initially.
Yeah, like you look at it right now, if nothing were to happen, and I will assume that Washington will be back. So, the back end, Hamilton would probably have to play there again. It'd be Hamilton and Washington on the back end. And then in nickel, you'd probably be looking at, if Millette is healthy, you'd probably be looking at Humphrey and Wiggins on the outside with Millette on the inside. That's no guarantee, though. So they definitely have some guys to add at both position groups, I would say. I'm just going to kind of clump trade candidates and free agents in together here because there's not too many rumors about secondary guys that could be moved. But obviously, Jair Alexander is a guy that there's a lot of talk has been around him. He'd be pretty expensive. Probably not in terms of what you have to give up to get him, but contract-wise, pretty expensive. Martin Emerson's a name that's been floating around on the Browns. Played pretty well, like early on, and I think he's not been as good the past couple of years. He could be a guy that might be moved. Tyrann Mathieu, I personally would not be interested in Tyrann Mathieu. I think he's a little old. Maybe 4 years ago I would have been. But in terms of free agents, a lot of guys at corner and safety. DJ Reed, great corner for the Jets. Travarius Ward, even better corner for the 49ers. Rasul Douglas on the Bills, sort of their number 2 guy with Christian Benford over there. Byron Murphy, probably going to be the biggest contract on the market here. Carlton Davis, Asante Samuel Jr. from the Chargers, and of course, Darius Slay, who was just released. Safety, Javon Holland, Cameron Bynum, probably going to be too expensive for the Ravens. Justin Reed is interesting. I'm not sure what his contract is going to be like, but the Ravens did hire the Chiefs secondary coach. So that's really, really interesting. Harrison Smith, Trevon Moehrig, Justin Simmons. Jeremy Chin, more of a cheaper option there. And Andre Cisco. Zach, whether it's a trade guy or free agent, corner, safety, who is someone you're looking at, kind of hoping the Ravens bring in?
Yeah, I kind of see it as letting Marlon and Nate Wiggins be the top dogs again. Maybe your younger guys can have a bigger role, but you nailed it a little earlier. they have to have some help, some other veteran presence. It doesn't necessarily need to be a long contract by any means. It can be a 1 or 2 year deal. That's kind of where their bread and butter has been. But I look at Darius Slay, like I mentioned. I look at someone even like a Jeremy Chin or Justin Simmons, where they had a stamp on the game. Even last season, Justin Simmons was kind of a shocker, and he didn't get signed for a long time and ended up going, I think it was the Falcons, and ended up leading or being a part of a pretty good defense, an improving defense. And I think if you can get someone like that to be your kind of backup safety behind Ardarius,
Eddie Jackson, the Eddie Jackson move.
yeah, right, the upgrade of Eddie
Yeah.
Jackson, that would be, night and day. So I look towards some veteran leadership / guys that can be playmakers. Even though you said that you weren't for him, if Tyrann Mathieu were to become available via release, I think I saw something about that too. A cheap contract there, I would definitely entertain it. You guys are against it, but this guy's a playmaker, and that's another veteran name, a part of just a few guys that I'm looking at.
Right. When you read off this list, it's a lot of guys who I remember years ago, I was intrigued by the aspect of them potentially becoming a Raven, getting selected by them in the draft. These are a lot of guys that I had my eyes on come draft time, in their respective drafts. But I think that when you look at the trade market, there's one guy that all intrigues us. I mean, seriously. And I just want to say that we just saw Deebo Samuel get traded from the 49ers to the Commanders for, I think, a 5th-round pick. Mm-hmm. And the 49ers pretty much ate his entire salary for a 5th-round pick. You cannot tell me that the Ravens cannot offer something better than that, even similar to that or even better, to the Green Bay Packers to get Jair Alexander. Now, I know he's kind of expensive, obviously, like we said. But if you can offer a 4th or 5th-round pick and Green Bay can eat at least the majority of his salary, and you can get a guy who I think is 28, 29-year-old, former all-pro cornerback, I'm taking it. I am calling Green Bay, and I'm going to try to make this move on Baltimore. I know he's got a troubled injury history in the last couple of years, and that's the reason Green Bay is moving on from him. But I'm all for taking the chance because, like Zach said, I'm totally okay with nodding Marlowe and Nate Wiggins as the top dogs in the secondary. I'm all for them being cornerback 1 and 2 respectively. I just think if you can bring in a guy who's a former All-Pro and he's still on the good side of 30, not by much, of course, but he's on the good side of 30. Not to mention a small little thing that I would love is he's a former teammate with Lamar at Louisville, and him and Lamar are incredible friends. I mean, that is a great relationship there. It's kind of like, last week or whenever it was, we did the offensive line podcast, the whole Mekhi Becton thing. Louisville, like it's a little thing, but it goes a long way. And it would be fun to see potentially Jair Alexander end up in Baltimore. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a pretty decent shot that they could make it work. Granted, the Deebo trade, like I just said. When you dive into the free agent market, it's a lot of guys who are going to get a lot of money, corner 1 and corner 2 money. And we're essentially looking for kind of a filler, maybe cornerback 2, but more so after Nate, because I really want him to take all the reps. Brad, I know you're a big fan of Asante Samuel Jr. I know that's a guy that intrigues you a lot. You've mentioned him off air before. Darius Slay, I would be for. He's part of the almost became a Raven team, I think 2 years ago. A trade was literally in place for Darius Slay to become a Raven, I believe. And then the Eagles stepped in and changed his mind. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but at least the Ravens have the core of these positions already intact, atop the list. It's not like we're looking for a number 1 safety or a number 1 corner. It's kind of like wide receiver that we talked about recently. Yeah. It's more so just fillers, looking for quality depth, guys that you can rely on if something comes up. And I think there's plenty of options here, and the Ravens have tons of capital and ways to make money to make any of these moves really happen.
Yeah, of course. And getting into the draft prospects, got Travis Hunter, who is going to be probably a top 3 pick. But I remember when the Ravens were 0-2 this season, we were like, maybe Travis Hunter is going to Baltimore, but obviously did not end up happening. Will Johnson, obviously, also going to go top 10 corner from Michigan. Then you get some guys that could be late first-round guys. Jahdae Barron, Siobhan Revel, Benjamin Morrison, I think are all guys that could be late first-round picks. I like all 3 of them, too. Draft is going to be interesting to see if the Ravens have a need there, if they can go BPA. I think if Ravens fill in the O-line a little bit, maybe sign an edge rusher or something like that, I think they could go corner in the first round if one of these guys is there. Maxwell Hairston's a guy that I think, has been. I was watching Mel Kiper talk about him a little bit. Mel Kiper was saying he might end up going in the first round just because he's like an athletic freak, ran a great 40 time. So that's another guy out of Kentucky. Safety, similar to Mike Green, having a great Senior Bowl and not being a late first round pick anymore. This guy, Nick Emenworry out of South Carolina, probably, he was mocked to the Ravens a little bit past couple weeks. He's probably not going to get to 27 anymore. Amazing combine performance. He's, I think, a 10 RAS score. Just insane player. Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame is a guy I think could be in play at 59. So we'll see about that. But, I think corner maybe could be a late first round sort of thing. Maybe Xavier Watts in the second round, maybe another corner in the second round. But I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting as we get further into late April to see what the Ravens do here.
Yeah, I didn't really mention safety as far as the free agent class. Because this is exactly what I want. I mean, the Ravens have such a good history of grabbing late round safeties, like 6th or 7th round, and they become literally starters who end up signing huge free agent deals or they stay here long term. And I'm all for the Ravens staying away from safety come free agency and attacking in the draft, whether it's round 1, round 2, round 3, any round of this draft. I'm confident the Ravens, they know who they like, they know the players, and their development process is incredible. I mean, these guys always turn out to be good, and I'm all for it. Go after a guy. If Nick Emenworry's there, I don't think he is. I agree with Brad. I think he kind of just shot himself up into probably the top 20, to be honest with you, because they're kind of comparing him to Kyle Hamilton, just athletic freak, can do it all type player. And obviously we took Kyle Hamilton 14th overall. So it's probably very reminiscent of that. And I mean, there's a lot of guys here too. Malachi Starks obviously has a really good history, but he's probably going to go super early. I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Emenworry is the first one off the board, though. I'm not going to lie. I think Starks could potentially be there. I don't know. It just depends on how this draft board falls out. And see, obviously there's always crazy runs on random positions, and potentially that could be something other than safety. And the Ravens could get a really good steal value-wise in the first or second round here. I don't really know much about any of the guys after the top 3, so I'll be curious to see. But I'm very confident in the Ravens, whoever they draft as far as safety, because we know it's going to work out.
Yeah, that's well said. I basically want to echo it. I think that the safety department I'm not necessarily looking at as much. If you do reach an extension with Ardarius, or if you end up tendering, I assume that you want to keep him long-term with Hamilton. So I just don't see that besides the late round guys. I love that take, Dawson. Other than that, the corners, maybe if we don't get any veteran guy, I think technically we do have the veteran leadership with Millette and technically Marlon. It's kind of funny to say that, but if you have those two already, I think another young guy being somewhat early is in the picture, but I feel more as though we would go offensive line, pass rush, that kind of side of it rather than secondary. I think there's too many good options later and in free agency to kind of pick this in the draft, unless EDC feels the opposite way.
It's well said. I just feel more confident real quick. I just feel like more confident with the Ravens developing a safety later in the draft than it would be like a corner. Like if you're telling me they're taking a corner round 5, or I'm sorry, if they're taking a corner round 4 or they're taking a safety round 6, like I'm more confident in the safety round 6.
Yes.
Turning into a good player. Like it sounds weird, but seriously, like that's like, I don't know if you guys agree, but I'm serious. Like, so I would literally, if I'm the Ravens, I'm taking, Ardarius Washington off the market. He's coming back to Baltimore. You got K-Ham, obviously, who he's not going anywhere. And then you take a guy late in the draft. I'm confident with those 3 rolling forward in the safety room.
Yeah, and we'll sort of transition to what we would do right now, because that's sort of what I'm about to talk about. Like, I would love for Kyle Hamilton to be back in the box. And I think you need to add, obviously, not I think, you need to add a safety in order for that to happen. Like, I don't know. Justin Reed is like really interesting. Like, I'm not saying they can pay, like, I mean, maybe they could pay him like $15 million a year, but I don't know. Like, you look at like left tackle, guard, edge, corner, safety are probably the positions that you at least want to have someone before the draft. I don't know. It's like, do they go sign like a Chin or a Cisco? Or maybe like a Justin Simmons. Like, I would just love for Hamilton to be able to be in the box again. Or, you sign a Asante Samuel and Marlon plays in the slot and Hamilton just plays on the back end the whole year. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know. It's just tough. Like, I guess someone can try to echo my thoughts here, but like, I'm more so I want them to get a safety, and I also think they should get a corner too. When I say that, I mean free agents or like day 1 or 2 guys.
I mean, traditionally the Ravens have very hybrid DBs. We have guys
Yeah.
who can play all over the field. You see Marlowe in the slot, you see him outside. Kyle Hamilton, of course, plays all across the field. I wouldn't be surprised if dude was lining up in the nose tackle one day. Like, there's a million different routes, and we've kind of echoed this with the other podcast too, with wide receiver and offensive line. But like, seriously, when it comes to DB, there is a million different routes the Ravens can go.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll prioritize spending money heavy on this in this position or just in this unit in free agency, just because I think offensive line is really going to be a focus for the Ravens early on in free agency. Of course, locking up Stanley, I would hope that gets done soon. And I would probably bet they go after a guard in free agency. They'll probably test the market for DBs, but dude, they just get paid a lot of money. Like,
Yeah.
they get paid a lot of money, and the Ravens are going to have to invest into Kyle Hamilton here shortly, and probably Darius Washington too. So they're going to put a lot of money into this room here in the near future, and I just can't see them going out spending over $10 million a season on a guy right now. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense because you have a young second-year corner now in Nate Wiggins who is going to be cheap for the next few years. So why not prioritize that and utilize that to your best ability? I just, it is tough to see where the Ravens go here. I could potentially see them signing a guy that we don't even have listed here. They can find a guy who's released, because that always happens throughout the offseason. There's a bunch of cuts. Of course, the Ravens love that. It's, the comp pick formula.
Yeah.
They love the veterans who get released, and you can get them for cheap contracts. So I think, honestly, it's going to be a waiting game. I think the Ravens are going to test this market, not find any good deals at first. I think they'll wait potentially after the draft. They'll find a guy. They'll probably ink him to a pretty good value contract, but it'll be in hopes of him, bouncing back or having a rejuvenation career year.
My offseason plan would be to go after a high IQ veteran safety, whether that is Justin Simmons or Tyrann Mathieu. I'm a big advocate for one of those guys. I think corner situation is a little more flip the coin. It could be an early draft decision, or it could be a Darius Slay, and you allow, the rest of those young guys to develop. I think a lot of people are high on someone like TJ Tampa. I think he could get a few more reps if they allow a Darius Slay to be signed and then let the draft kind of be handled in different ways. It is also kind of weird that if you have 11 picks?
Yeah.
If you have that many picks, you're probably getting, 1 or 2 secondary guys. It feels like a Ravens thing to do. So on the other hand, they could get some young guys just to be a part of the group, but I see it as a veteran safety signing and possibly a veteran corner signing if it is Darius Slay, or via early in the draft. If it's later on, I see the Dawson route totally, the 6th round, 7th round safety somehow working out. But other than that, I see honestly kind of clearly for me. I don't know why I feel that strong. I feel like the top dogs in the corner department are just too much money. If you saw, like, Brad, I wanted to almost ask you, signing a Justin Reed, if his value is pretty high, I don't feel comfortable with that at all. And if you do get someone like him, or you go after a Holland in free agency, then does that mean that Ardarius is gone? Or are we saying that we have 2 safeties and then hopefully by the end of one of those contracts, we can pay Hamilton? Because I think it starts to get a little icky whenever you think about the fact that we have to give Hamilton his money here soon.
I look at it as like, if you bring in a Justin Reed, Hamilton can play in the box, and like corners is much less of a need. So it's like Reed and Ardarius back there long term with Hamilton as a box safety, and then Humphrey and Wiggins on the outside, and then like TJ Tampa is your number 3 outside corner. And obviously, you'd still want to go get someone, but with the way that like the Ravens play defense, I'm not going to say Zach Orr because it's been this way for a while with McDonald. Like everyone, not like Nate Wiggins isn't going to play deep safety, but like everyone can play everywhere. So bringing in a Justin Reed sort of does just as much for corner as it does for safety because of Hamilton's ability. So that's kind of how I look at it. But yeah.
So, I mean, I guess what you guys are kind of saying, but not saying is you would feel confident in the Ravens bringing in one body in this room, allowing the other guys who are versatile across the unit to kind of fill in and play wherever is needed. I mean, it's essentially what you're saying is say the Ravens bring in Asante Samuel or one of these other guys, I'm looking at the list, Darius Slay, they can come in. And so you basically push Marlowe to inside of the slot, and then you have Nate and Darius Slay on the outside, K. Hammond or Darius back. And it would still allow, and then say a 5th or 6th round safety that the Ravens would probably be pretty confident in filling in when they want to push K. Ham up into the box on certain, plays. Like, I would feel pretty good about that unit. I mean, seriously, that would be a really good secondary. So if you want to look at the outside picture, it's essentially Ravens bring in one quality unit or one quality player to this unit, cornerback or safety, preferably a guy who's versatile and can do most, which is what the Ravens prioritize. And then with the versatility of all the other guys, it would fill in perfectly. And you would basically have no empty position.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
And something to add, like it's basically a puzzle piece that can be filled by almost any of these pieces, right?
Right.
The kind of change from last year halfway through and becoming a top defense was because if you figure out what works, then why not keep doing it? The stuff beforehand, I think, only adds another level to a more dangerous defense. If we can have a puzzle piece that fits that first half defense where Hamilton does get to play up instead of back, it only makes us better. I think it only adds on to a defense that, has a whole half season of tape now to look at. And I think that's probably an intriguing thing. I assume Zach Orr is asking for something like that rather than a corner. I think that just saying that out loud makes me think that they'll target a safety a little more strong than we think.
Yeah, for sure.
Well said.
Some other NFL news that I guess everyone already watching this probably knows, but Bengals franchise tag T. Higgins, $26.2 million. It's the second franchise tag in a row. I kind of understand it because it just gives them more time to try to extend him if they end up doing that. I mean, if he plays on the tag, it's a terrible move. But did either of you have any quick thoughts on that? Or
I hate the franchise tag. I genuinely do, and I feel bad for the players that get tagged several times in a row. Like that is like that's so terrible. And I mean, it's probably good because T. Higgins is eventually going to leave the Bengals, which would benefit the Ravens. And they're going to have to pay Jamar Chase like $1 billion, which is also going to benefit the Ravens. Therefore, they won't be able to sign anybody else because the amount of money Jamar Chase is going to get is absurd.
Chase might get 40.
That is absurd.
So wouldn't that mean you're paying Chase, Higgins, and Burrow a total of like $100 million a year? Just
like more than 100.
Yeah.
Like 115.
I just don't get how unless those three just become unbelievable, which is possible. Your team just can't get better unless you nail the draft every time, or you get free agents that want to come there for cheap deals, and they somehow all work out.
And they have been doing the opposite of nailing the draft too. So
I just don't see a where this is the right way to do it. I think if you move Higgins, they can still draft a guy or find a guy that wants to be there because that's not going to be difficult for a cheaper contract. So I don't know. I just don't. It wouldn't sit well with me if I was a Bengals fan. Just besides, trying to retain him.
Carolina needs to call Cincinnati.
Yeah, and let me preface this by saying I think T. Higgins is a phenomenal player. I think he's probably a top 10 receiver.
Yeah.
If I were the Bengals, I would move on. Like, you can't pay two receivers $70 million.
And think about what you can get for T. Higgins, dude. You'd be able to get another core foundational piece somewhere where you need it way more than receiver.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, if you have Jamar Chase, he's going to allow other receivers to look a lot better than they are, and you're not going to be worried about wide receiver. I would trade him and get somebody else.
I don't want to say that T. Higgins is like replaceable immediately. I just want to say that I think Burrow can probably make another receiver almost as good, if you just get a talented guy in there. So
Right.
I think just alongside being across from being on the same field with Jamar Chase too, it just feels like they can be smart about this and not pay him. I don't know. Maybe it's about like
Yeah.
making Burrow happy. I don't know. I have no idea.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm done talking about the Bengals. We're done.
You're right.
But yeah, so that was our final offseason position preview video. What are we thinking, guys? Live Thursday night? Sometime later this week, we'll go live for a free agency preview. That'll be fun.
Close.
And then a week away from today is
so cool.
the first day. So yeah, that's going to be exciting. Appreciate you guys for watching. Thanks for all the love and support. As always, make sure to like the video. Thumbs up button right below it. Helps us out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already. And you can find us on Spotify. Links in the description if you'd rather listen over there. I promise you guys we're going to try to get on Apple Podcasts soon. If you guys, because personally, I don't even have Spotify, so I know we'll try to get on Apple Podcasts for you guys too. And with that being said, we will see you guys next time. Peace. Thanks for watching.